We got one more guest here for this Tuesday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is professional handicapper Rolf Michaels from WagerTalk.com. Rolf, how's it going today, man?
Going great, Adam. I appreciate it. Always good to follow Brian and listening and getting my golf bets in for the weekend.
Well, there you go. Hopefully those ones come through for all of us here. And Rolf, I started the segment with Brian talking about Super Bowl 53 and some initial thoughts and, what you think about the line and the line movement that we've seen so far. So I know out there in Vegas, predominantly Patriots minus 2.5. In the offshore market, anywhere from Patriots minus 1.5 at Pinnacle to minus 3 at Bovada. None of those numbers should surprise anybody. What do you think here? What are your early impressions of Super Bowl 53?
Well, obviously you could bet this matchup prior to last week's games, and the line was picked. So, what happened to make the Patriots 2.5 points better? Well, we watched them both win in overtime, and so not much has changed. So to me, it seems you have some long-term value on the Rams. But then in that same thought, I get thinking, and, we know Belichick against rookie quarterbacks is the premier coach and has an outstanding record. Well, we saw what Belichick, KC scored their points, but he still held Mahomes in check. So now he plays another young quarterback who, despite having a solid season, is still only in his second year, has 3 playoff games under his belt, but, now has to face a Belichick-devised defense with 2 weeks to prep. So, it's a game right now that I don't see myself. I mean, if it gets over 3.5, I'm going to jump on the Rams because of the value. But right now, I don't see myself playing either side in total and just looking for value in props.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, quite frankly, that's where a lot of the value is anymore in the Super Bowl, is looking at the prop market because there are so many different things out there. We'll talk a lot about props as we get into next week. We'll talk about, with our guests about their favorite props and some more matchup-based stuff for the Super Bowl here. But, Rolf, let's transition to college basketball, and let's take a look at the Big East Conference, which, as I look up and down the Big East here, this is a league that's down a pretty decent amount from last year.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have Villanova's your top team, and your top team actually surprised me. I thought Villanova would be down even further than they were. Perhaps it's because the rest of the conference is down. Teams like Duke and Kentucky and Villanova, each of those teams lost 4 players to the NBA draft. Remember, there's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft. So you're losing 4 significant starters. Duke and Kentucky can recruit those one and outs. Kentucky, obviously, with Travis Reed, a big transfer. But I thought Villanova would be down a notch. So for them at 14-5 and going 5-0, yes, they lost to Furman at home, and yes, they lost to Penn on the road. But they're now a team that's, playing Jay Wright ball, slowing the pace down, an efficient offense, a solid defense, keeping in the games. But I don't, right now, looking at the conference, I mean, I have Villanova, outside the top 20. And when you have, when your top team in your conference is 25-30 and you only have, 1 or 2 other teams in the top 40 or 50, a lot of them are in that 40 to 50 stretch. I mean, to be honest, the Big East is just a touch better than the Pac-12, which we know is just probably a touch better than the American for any of the major conferences.
I think you look at Villanova, and yes, talent takes you a very long way in college basketball, as we see year in and year out. But you want to talk about the impact that coaching has. Villanova last year, they were about 150th or something in the country in tempo. They had all of that offensive firepower, and they used it, and they played very well on both ends of the floor. This year, they don't have as much offensive firepower, so they slow it down, and they're still having success. I mean, this is a testament to how good Jay Wright is.
Yeah, there's no question. Yes, he has a couple go-to guys this year, with Paschal and Booth. But again, you lose 4 people drafted in the round and be able to adjust your game. Last year they were the most efficient team as far as KenPom goes going in, a number 1 seed. As you said, they were playing at a pace of 150. This year, 340, so they're almost last of the 353 teams. Their average length of possession, boy, they hold on to the ball. They know that, as long as they don't turn the ball over, they are decent on mistakes. They're a decent free throw shooting team. They're a very, very good team. But don't make any mistake about it. No matter what they finish, if they win the Big East and move forward, they're not that same type of number one seed team. And the funny thing is, let's remember, last year Villanova was so good as a number one seed, they didn't even win the Big East last year. Xavier actually won the regular season going 15-3. Villanova was 14-4 in conference play last year. So, again, one of those coaches that knew he had the talent, used the regular season as a tune-up, got better as the regular season progressed, didn't sweat a loss here and there. If it made his team better, hey, losing doesn't mean anything. Getting to the big dance in the position you want to get to with the players playing the way you want to play is their only goal.
So it looks like as we look at the rest of the Big East here, Marquette, pretty well-defined number 2 or maybe even a number 1B type of team here.
Yeah, Marquette, if you remember, there was a couple long shots that I took early in the year when we talked about it. Marquette was one and Indiana was the other. Well, Indiana's off 4 losses, so they're struggling a little bit. But, you look at the Marquette team, 16-3, 5-1 in conference play, and all the losses are, I would consider, good losses. Indiana on the road, St. John's on the road, and Kansas in a neutral setting. You have a situation here where, I perceive coming down the stretch, they're only going to have a couple more losses. They go to Baylor, they go to Villanova, and maybe a Seton Hall game in that mix. But other than that, they're looking at, a 2 or 3 seed. They'll make that dance. They'll be, in that 23-24 win category. And, yes, they are an improved team, but last year they actually had a better offensive team than this year. The big difference is their defense this year. They've done very well on the defensive side of the ball. They're top 40 in both offense and defense. And, anytime you got a player like Marcus Howard controlling the ball, not turning the ball over and giving that scorability from the point, he's going to keep in a lot of games.
All right, so you've got Villanova and Marquette, who, may be interchangeable as the season goes along. We'll see, as long as Howard stays healthy, Marquette will still be able to score. We'll see how Villanova keeps developing. What the hell do you do with the rest of this conference, Rolf? How do you have these teams sort of structured?
Well, you talk, those are the top 2 teams. And then I would say clearly you've got 4 teams in the next category. Butler currently is 12-7, 3-3 in conference play. St. John's 15-4, 3-4 in conference play. And then Creighton and Seton Hall. Creighton's a team that, despite being 11-8 and 2-4 in conference play, well, there's going to be a lot of teams that are 2-4 in conference play when your 4 losses are Butler on the road, Marquette in overtime, Villanova, and then St. John's on the road. So they've played the toughest conference in the Big East. So that's one thing for those people that look at records and moving forward as we get into this middle phase of conference play. You look at a record and it's very, very deceiving. I probably have Creighton as the 4th best team, but if you look at them in the standings, they're down at 8th or 9th, having played the toughest conference schedule by far. So when you find those teams that have an even or 500 record and a losing conference record, there's a lot of times you get them with value coming in after playing a tough stretch. Like Indiana tonight, off 4 straight losses against 4 top-ranked. I think Creighton's going to have that turnaround where you're going to see, Creighton's good enough this year where they're going to get to 18, 19, 20 wins, probably make the tournament, but they're going to finish this stretch pretty strong with the way their conference schedule played out. So to me, that's the biggest thing is to take a look at who your conference schedule is. The only team that, at the bottom of the barrel for the Big East, and bottom of the barrel, I mean by teams that are probably in the 100 range, or right around 100 as far as the 353 goes, are Georgetown and DePaul. And even DePaul, DePaul has picked up 2 road wins in their last 3 games. They won at St. John's. They won at Seton Hall. So when your worst teams can come in and knock off the B-level teams, the non-elite but the next best teams, you know that you have a conference from top to bottom that you have to be mentally tough every night of the week.
All right, so in looking at some of these teams here, looking at a Butler, a Xavier, a St. John's, can one of those teams separate here and be, the well-defined, really, for lack of a better term, third best team here? I mean, who do you think has the most upside after Marquette and Villanova?
I like the St. John's team, and maybe it's Shamari Pond's the best player in the conference. They're coming in with 4 losses. They played an easy non-conference schedule, and road losses to Butler, Villanova, and Seton Hall. So boom, you took 3 of the top teams out. You played 3 of the top teams on the road already, and you lost those. That's fine. You're going to win those other games. You're going to be able to challenge them at home. To me, St. John's, the way Chris Mullins has them playing, St. John's last year, under Chris Mullins, 14-19 couple years ago, improved to 16-17 last year, and now 15-4. So you're in that process, which I like seeing. I like seeing the progression. This is obviously his 4th year. So you go from 8 wins to 14 wins to 16 wins to already having 15 wins. When you have a system in place, when you have that all-conference and all-American type point guard, you have other potential scorers where, you have Mustafa Heron as a shooting forward who can get it done as well. You play decent defense, but you have good offense. You have a faster-paced team in the conference. They're the kind of team to me that can take it to the next level, has played their toughest games already, has that strong home court when they play there. And I think St. John's right now, to me, is the 3rd best team in the conference.
All right, so let's talk situational spots here in the Big East, or maybe some trends or some angles that you look for here out of this conference. I mean, it is fairly spread out. You've got Marquette up in Wisconsin. You've got Creighton all the way out in Omaha. You've got some teams on the East Coast here like Providence and St. John's. You've got Butler out in Indiana. So it is pretty spread out here. So, are there any situational spots you do look to exploit?
I do look when some of the faster-paced teams, the Georgetown or the Marquettes, when they play that Butler-Xavier back-to-back, both are very slow-paced this year, as Villanova is. The conference has 3 very slow-paced teams. So when you're an offensive team and you have to play those back-to-back games, and if you're playing Villanova, Butler, and Xavier in a couple games, it's tough for an offense to stay in sync, I think, when you're playing when you play any 2 of those 3 teams in close proximity in back-to-back games. Obviously up-tempo teams want to play fast, and when you are slowed down and you have to play those teams on the road especially, that's when I like fading those teams. Right now Georgetown's playing at the fastest pace, and St. John's likes playing fast. Marquette has slowed it down quite a bit. They actually play faster on the road than at home. But I situationally wise, or Pac-12 with the travels, any back-to-back games, I haven't found anything that works for me in the Big East as far as saying, off Villanova or having Villanova on deck or, playing the best defense. It's funny for me to see that Marquette's playing the best defense in the conference, because for those that have followed Marquette for years, Marquette has been an offensive team all these years, and Steve Wojciechowski has done a great job, like you talked about, Villanova making the adjustment from offense to defense. Well, this year, even though he has Marcus Howard, Marquette is a team that has played great defense. So, to me, I look tempo-wise and I look for some totals where you have those faster-paced teams, but like I said, when they're on the road against those slower-paced teams, usually the better team at home can control the tempo. So not so much for the sides as much as for the totals.
All right, let's talk Horizon League, one of the low majors out there, and we've got a pretty well-defined top and bottom in the Horizon League. That would be Northern Kentucky at the top, Cleveland State at the bottom. So What about the Horizon League, Rolf? I mean, I guess we can start with Northern Kentucky, and I mean, how good is this team?
Well, Northern Kentucky won it last year, went 22-10, and went 15-3, and you and I, I'm sure, remember watching Cleveland State beat them to knock them out. They were certainly a tournament type team, but like we talked with, let's put it in perspective compared to the Big East. We had DePaul and Georgetown right around 100 out of the 353 teams. Well, that's where Northern Kentucky is 100, and everyone else is in the. I'm going to throw Wright State in there because Wright State, to me, Wright State was a team that last year was second in the conference. Wright State is a team that returned 4 starters this year. Wright State has played a very, very difficult schedule. So right now, Wright State's 10-10, 4-3 in conference play. But to me, they will clearly, at the end of the road, be the second best team in the Horizon. Like I said, Northern Kentucky is about 100, so that compares to the worst in the Big East with DePaul. I have Wright State in the 150 range, and basically everyone else 200 or higher. So you clearly have that definition. The surprise team to me this year is Detroit. Detroit is a team that was picked last by most people in the Horizon. Well, they're 5-2 right now. They played enough tough non-conference schedule going 8-11 on the season, 5-2 in conference play, and they are now coached by Mike Davis. For those that don't know, Mike Davis was at Texas Southern the last couple years, and yes, the same Mike Davis that coached at UAB in Indiana. So Detroit has that go-to type coach who this year has his son, who is clearly not only the best player in the league, Antoine Davis, he's probably going to be freshman type of the year, averaging 28 points per game. Antoine Davis was like a high 3-star coming out of high school, signed with Houston. He wasn't going to play for his father at Texas Southern. He signed at Houston, and when Mike Davis took the Detroit job, he asked for a release. Houston let him out of his scholarship. Now he's playing for his dad. His big brother's also an assistant coach on the team. And so Detroit really has that legitimate go-to scorer where this isn't a fluke that they're 5-2. They're clearly not the worst team on the Horizon. They're probably third or fourth in this situation. So, Northern Kentucky, no question. Wright State, I expect a big bounce back. Right now they lost to Detroit on the road. They didn't know what Detroit had at that time. They lost to Northern Kentucky. We know Northern Kentucky is the elite team. And then they also lost to Illinois Chicago. That was a bad loss at home. So Scott Nagy has his guys there. He's very confident. Scott Nagy had an article in the Dayton paper a couple days ago going into the Youngstown State and Cleveland State road games that he felt his team clearly just had a little lapse to start the season. He's got a very experienced team. They play very slow tempo with a decent offense. And normally you think slow-tempo teams are going to have a better defense than offense, and that's why they want to slow it down. He's not like that. He just runs an offense that has to have a lot of passes in it, a lot of motion in it, and they're actually, their offensive efficiency is the top 100, where their defensive efficiency is the bottom. So, it's going to come down to me, Northern Kentucky, Wright State at the end. Detroit's going to have some noise in there, and Oakland's the next level. When you're talking the bottom of the teams, the 2 worst, clearly it's the 2 Northeastern teams with Youngstown State and Cleveland State, both just continuing to struggle. Cleveland State, we thought Dennis Felton, coming from Georgia, having taken 9 or 10 years off, would be the next big hire at Cleveland State. But after going 12-23 in his first year and 5 wins last year, Youngstown State, although Youngstown State, to me, they're a bad team, but they're a bad team with a big home road dichotomy. Youngstown State, to me, is very capable of winning a couple games at home. They haven't done it this year, and in fact, they have 2 conference wins both on the road. But they seem to me they play better down the stretch on the road and they pull a couple upsets. Maybe it's just tough to get to the Youngstown State Airport, or, when you have a team that's been that bad for that many years, a lot of times you can just look past those teams. And Youngstown State has one of those home courts where they can pull a couple upsets. So, again, a 2 or 3 league team that, you can get run out a little bit. The interesting thing about this thing is you have one team, Green Bay, which sets itself apart against everyone else in terms of tempo. Green Bay is a top 10 team as far as tempo goes. Everyone else in the conference is 75 or lower. So when you have one team that is unique, a lot of times they can cause some trouble. Green Bay 10-10 on the year, 4-3, wins against Milwaukee, Youngstown State, Cleveland State, Illinois, Chicago, all bottom of the league. But their road losses at Detroit, not bad, at Oakland, not bad, home against IUPUI. So if you have a team playing those Thursday, Saturday games where sometimes the Horizon plays Thursday, only has one day off on Saturday, if you see a team that's physically beat up off that Thursday game and has to play Green Bay, the only team in the top 75 at tempo that likes to press the play, that's a situation I look for in the Horizon.
So something I noticed here about the Horizon League, you've got Northern Kentucky that's won 4 in a row, Cleveland State that's dropped 8 in a row. Nobody else has a streak longer than – is that because these teams are pretty interchangeable? Is it because these teams are inconsistent? Or is it that home-road dichotomy that you talk about?
Well, it's not that much of a home. It's not that big of a home favorite in this conference. The road team can win quite a bit. I think it's just that. You have a lot of teams that are in that 200 to 270 range. 6 of your teams are in that same rank. So really, it's who's playing well, who can shoot 48 instead of 42% on any night. You have a lot of hot and cold teams that get to be the shooting teams. Your offensive teams are Northern Kentucky, Detroit, and Oakland. Your best defensive teams, Illinois, Chicago, and IUPUI. And, comparing those efficiency-wise, no one in the conference, efficiency-wise, is 120 or better. So, again, you have a bunch of mid-level teams with mediocre defenses as far as efficiency rank goes, all bunched in together. You're going to have a lot of spreads between 2 and 9, home or away. And again, it's just the hotter shooting team that's in the right situation to get the win.
All right, so one of the things that we like to do here on our segments with Rolf, we like to talk about his top situational and technical plays, whether that's for today or maybe for a little bit later on in the week. It's a decent-sized card for Tuesday night, not one of the bigger ones that we've had this year. What are you looking at here tonight, Rolf, for later in the week from a situational standpoint?
I got to have a situational play for tonight and a technical play for tomorrow. And the situational play also includes a system. So, again, remember, anytime we're talking trends and angles, that are team-specific, they're not clearly as strong as a system. And this system is something I look at. It's a team that's a home favorite this game. They have same season revenge, and they're off a loss as an away favorite. So you have the double disappointment, and that team tonight is Akron. Well, Akron lost to Central Michigan earlier this year, back on January 8th. They were a 1.5-point favorite. They lost a buzzer beater at the end by 2 points, 88-86. Akron also off the game at Miami, Ohio, where they were a small favorite. They lost that game 68-61. Well, since 2010, those teams now 43-29, 60% in that spot. So again, we're not talking magical 80-90% numbers, but it's a system that makes sense. Disappointed, gaining revenge. You were the better team, you lost. Disappointed because you were the better team in your last game and lost. Now, that could also mean you're playing very poorly, but again, usually the line's adjusted in that. but Akron minus the points against Central Michigan tonight, the situational play.
Yeah, I remember I actually gave out Akron in that road game against Central Michigan on one of my YouTube videos, because the game prior against Western Michigan, they shot like 29% or some absurdly low number and still won the game. So this was a team that you got to figure some positive feelings. Central Michigan, not a great team by any means, but I like that revenge spot here tonight for Akron.
And it was an overtime loss at Central Michigan. Now, that loss at Central Michigan, it was also their first conference road game. So, again, it's a situation where you can understand. Akron has struggled a bit this year, though. I thought they would be a little better than they are. They're 10-8 record. They're 2-3 conference play. So, you're 2-3 in conference play. You have home games tonight against Central Michigan and then Northern Illinois. It's your chance to get back to the Mendoza line and above it. And again, Akron's a team that was expected, to be there. So I think, I think the Zips in a nice spot tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to look at a team that was the hottest ATS team. One of the hottest ATS teams in the country has cooled a little bit. And we're going to go with Oklahoma over Oklahoma State. That's game number 825 tomorrow. Oklahoma comes in 13-3-1 against the spread. They're off home losses against Kansas State. Well, Kansas State's back to healthy, so that's not bad. And a road loss to Texas. Oklahoma State coming in on a 2-10 ATS run. Oklahoma State with 4 losses, a home win against Texas and a West Virginia road win in between there. Oklahoma is a team that their losses this year, Kansas, Texas Tech, Kansas State, Texas, and Wisconsin, all top 25 Ds. Oklahoma State, not a top 25 D. They're about 75. And I think the Sooners with that 13-3 ATS run, Oklahoma State on a 2-10 ATS run. That's game 825 tomorrow. Game will be right around pick Oklahoma 1, Oklahoma 2. So it's going to be a short road price for the Sooners, but they get it done, win and cover at Stillwater.
Rolf Michaels, professional handicapper over at wagertalk.com. What's going on over there right now, Rolf? Back on a great run. Last year, January and February were just awesome in college basketball, hitting over 63% with the amount of plays that I put out. This year, since the start of the month, at 67%. So just focusing on college hoops, we're back to where we've been, being red hot and excited moving forward. And you can follow Rolf on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Rolf Michaels, professional handicapper, wagertalk.com. Thanks so much for your time, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Adam.